Hello, Kamarjova. Can everyone hear me? I hope so. I'm Kelly Degnan, the United States Ambassador to Georgia. I had hoped to meet you all in person, but thanks to technology, we're able to do this live stream today to answer your questions and to meet virtually on the issue that we're all following so closely. Let me just start by introducing myself a little bit. I arrived on January 29th, about 2 months ago. I came from serving as the foreign policy advisor to the commander of United States Naval Forces Europe and Africa. Before that, I was the deputy ambassador at our embassy in Rome, Italy. So I read the news about Italy with a very heavy heart these days. But I also know that it's a very resilient country, so I have great confidence in them. I've been a diplomat for 27 years, and before that, I was an attorney for almost 8 years, 10 years, and before that, I was a journalist. So I've had a number of different experiences inside the government and outside the US government. I would have to say being a diplomat has been more fun than I ever would have imagined, despite its sometimes challenging periods. I'm from San Francisco, California, grew up in California, and my heart is definitely in San Francisco as my friends and family also go through a tough time battling this virus there. I do hope to meet many of you when I finally can get out and explore Georgia. I'm looking forward to that very soon, I hope. So we today are here to answer your questions, to hear a little bit about your experiences with this virus and provide the information that we have. We don't have all the answers. We'll do our best to get you answers where we can. I encourage you to go to the embassy website. There's a lot of good information there. And as we get answers to your questions that we can't answer today, we'll put those up on the website for you. I also encourage you to register with the STEP program, which is a way American citizens can get alerts and information through our consular services, including about flights and other travel-related incidents or consular information. We have a lot of questions, and so we gathered a few of our embassy team here. We have Jeanette Rivera, who is our consul. She handles all of the issues relating to American citizens, to visa issues, and she and her team have been working very hard over the last few weeks, as you can imagine, to assist American citizens here in Georgia and others as well. We also have Sarah Cummings, who's our medical provider here for the embassy, in case you have some questions about coronavirus or some of the kinds of questions that have come up. And we have our regional security officer in case there's any security related questions that we might be able to provide some answers for you. One of the main questions that we received was the question, of course, should I stay or should I go? And this is one that I know many of you have been grappling with, whether to return to the United States. And your decision process may have changed over the course of the weeks as more information came out about coronavirus and also about what is going on in the United States and here in Georgia. I have to say we have been very pleased and impressed with the way the Georgian government has responded to this crisis very early on, taking some tough decisions that I think have helped the government manage to control the spread and flatten that curve that's so important. Some of the restrictions that they've taken have been difficult for us. We're complying with them too, but they do make a difference. And I think if you look anywhere in the world, the places that did act quickly and sometimes aggressively in trying to contain the spread of the virus are the ones that have the more manageable situations. And Georgia is one of them. It's been internationally recognized for that now. We were very sorry to hear about the first 2 fatalities over the weekend, but that is still quite an impressive array in terms of numbers of cases, how early they've been tracking it, and how early they've been responding to it. We at the embassy are following all of the Georgian government restrictions from the very beginning. Social distancing, we're working from home for the most part. We rotate teams into the embassy just to check on critical matters that can't be done from home. But we are very much complying with the Georgian government restrictions, and I urge you to do the same. This is the way that all of us will get through this faster and healthier as well. So please comply with the government's restrictions. It will make a difference. Again, our team here, our first priority is the protection of American citizens. We're here to support you to the extent that we can, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this event today, just so we have a chance to reach out to you in a way that we're having to think creatively these days. But I hope that this will help address some of your questions. As to deciding whether to go back to the United States or not, this is obviously a very personal decision, and there's a lot of considerations that will go into it for each one of you that may be thinking about it. I think it was March 14th, so a couple weeks ago, the embassy took that, sat down and thought through who wanted to go back, who needed to go back. For the most part, it was a small group of people who, for various medical related reasons, thought that they might be better off being in the United States, where the level of care just starts at a higher level than here in Georgia. So you have more options in the United States in terms of private medical care. And so some of our employees, but a small number, sometimes because of their family members, decided to go back to the United States 2-3 weeks ago. For the most part, our embassy personnel have stayed in Georgia, have chosen to stay in Georgia and wait this out. But we are assessing every day the changes in the circumstances here and in the United States. One thing we've all seen, though, is that flights are getting fewer and fewer, borders are getting more restricted, and so that choice is something that I encourage you to make sooner rather than later, because your options are narrowing the longer that you wait. Another question we had was, can the U.S. government arrange flights for Americans who are trying to go to the United States? We are looking at commercial options for our personnel, and I would encourage you to do that as well if you're thinking about going back to the U.S. We are providing on that step notification system information about all the flights that we hear about. They take you either through Europe or through Doha or Dubai, and then you have a connecting flight to the United States. So we're trying to put out as much information as we can to help you keep track of what your options are as you decide whether you and your family want to go back. I know that there's a lot of other questions. Many of them are fairly technical. So I think what I'll do now is invite Jeanette to come up, and she can address some of the consular-related, American Citizen Services-related questions. But I'll be here along with Sarah and Brian in case you have any other questions that I might be able to help you with. Again, it's my pleasure to meet you, virtually anyway, and I look forward to meeting you out in Georgia, where you can help me better understand what's going on in Georgia, what you love about Georgia, the things that I absolutely must see in Georgia, and we'll have a chance to have that conversation soon, I hope. Thank you very much. Jeanette?
Thank you, Ambassador Degnan. So So again, hello everybody, good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in for this virtual town hall. This is the first time that we have done something like this here with the Consular Section at Embassy Tbilisi, so bear with us with some of the technical glitches as we work through them. I understand that some people may have put questions into the chat section on the original link or earlier, which have disappeared from the screen. If so, please put them in again. That wasn't intentional. We're just trying to get all the questions together that we can. We also have a number of questions that people have submitted in advance. So I think I will lead off with some of those, which overlap with a few that I'm seeing in the chat session as well. So let's see. A lot of people are trying to find flights out of Georgia. As the ambassador mentioned, at this time, we are encouraging everyone who is seeking to leave Georgia to use the commercial options which are available. Georgian Airways in particular, and a couple other flights from other airlines are still running outbound flights. Most of these, the purpose of them is to retrieve Georgians from other countries and repatriate them back to Georgia. But the outbound leg of these flights from Tbilisi is available to purchase tickets. You may need to contact Georgian Airlines directly to purchase that portion of the ticket from Tbilisi to usually a destination in Europe. One of the questions we got from Samantha is, how do you book the second leg of your trip from Europe to the United States? In many cases, you may need to book that separately as two separate tickets, two separate itineraries. You can try going through a travel agent who may be able to link the two, but if not, then just consider it as two separate tickets. Contact Georgian Airways. You can get a ticket from Tbilisi to those European destinations and then work with other airlines flying in and out of those places in Europe. The embassy has been sending out emails a couple times a week with the updated information on these flights that we have, and we will continue to do that. So please monitor those emails, which are also posted on our website as well. Okay, we had a question from David. My family is in DC right now. If I manage to get back to DC, what is the procedure for quarantine? Can I do it at home or be taken from the airport to another place? You may be asking this question because the procedures are a little bit different here in Georgia. People who are arriving on flights here from certain destinations are being taken by the government to specific quarantine facilities. That is not the case in the United States right now. You will be recommended to self-quarantine for 14 days upon arrival in the United States if you have transited through many particular countries, including most of the Schengen zone. However, you can do that in your home. You won't be taken to any specific other location for that. We had a question from Tom on, can we comment on the outbound flights from Tbilisi? He says, the sooner you know the departure dates, then you can book the connecting flights. So as I said before, I understand this is a little bit logistically complicated because you may have to book two tickets and work out the transit part yourself. Most of the tickets on the outbound Georgian airline flights are only available for purchase about 2 days in advance. But you can look at the schedule that we're posting on the website and plan based on that. The flights have been pretty reliable, and in general, availability of seats on those outbound flights from Tbilisi is good. So if you want to go ahead and book the second leg of your trip a few more days in advance and then get the first leg once those flights become open for purchase, you could do it that way. All right, we've had a question from a number of citizens, including from Jacob, who wrote in and said, my 1-year visa-free in Georgia finishes in May. I was planning to cross the border to Armenia and come back to reset your 1-year clock here in Georgia. A lot of people are in that situation. It may not be possible right now because so many of the borders are closed. The embassy consulted with the government of Georgia to find out how they're going to handle those cases. And the response that we received was that when you are able to leave Georgia, you will be given a notice of fine, a sheet of paper indicating that you overstayed your visa and that you are subject to a fine. If you never return to Georgia, there is no enforcement of that fine. If you do need to return to Georgia, if you live, work, study here, for example, when you re-enter, you will be assessed a fine that you will pay in order to be allowed re-entry to Georgia. However, once you re-entered, you can apply to the government for a refund of that fine that you paid based on the extenuating circumstances at this time. That system may change in the future. The government may decide to treat it differently, but at this point, that is the information that they have given us about how to handle Americans or any foreign citizen in Georgia who overstays their allotted visa period. Okay, let's see. We had a few questions from Americans who are planning to have a baby in Georgia via surrogacy. We know this is a pretty common scenario. There are a number of couples in the United States who are planning to come to Georgia for the birth of their baby who will be born here via a surrogate. I actually have some very good news that we just got last night on this issue, which is that the government of Georgia has agreed on a case-by-case basis. They will work with the embassy to allow these parents to enter Georgia for the birth of their children, to wait out the quarantine period, take care of the documents, and then take their children back to the United States. The important thing is that you will need to work directly with the embassy, so please keep in touch with my office, American Citizen Services. This is the email address that you see on all those step notifications, askconsultabilisi@state.gov. So for all the parents out there who are expecting a child to be born in the next few months, please get in touch with us. Make sure that we know about you. We will work with you on your specific arrival plans and the details of that. Some related questions to those babies being born via surrogacy is, can we issue a passport? Yes, the embassy can still issue a passport to your child. You can still get a birth certificate from the government here. Everything is still in place to work with those. So I think that should answer questions from Eddie and Alex, who asked about those. In general, you may have heard that many of the passport agencies in the United States are closed right now and are not issuing routine passports anymore. However, our embassy, all overseas embassies, are still able to issue emergency passports, which can be produced within a day or two. So we still have that capability. Let's see. Bill also asked a question about repatriation flights. Is the U.S. government making plans to repatriate U.S. citizens from Georgia with charter flights? At this time, we do not have plans for a charter flight because commercial options are still available. These are the same options that embassy personnel are using as well. So if you are a United States citizen in Georgia trying to leave, please look at those commercial options and take advantage of them while they are still available. We have various questions about the stimulus checks. Everybody has heard about the economic stimulus package and the possibility of financial assistance from the US government. The embassy is not an expert on the details of how those stimulus checks will be issued and when. So I would like to refer all of you to the IRS website, Internal Revenue Service, which is irs.gov/coronavirus, where they have a lot of excellent detailed answers to all these questions about who is eligible and who is not, and how you can apply to get a stimulus payment. In general, I will let you all know that it is not necessary to be living in the United States. It's more tied to whether you filed taxes within the last 2 years. And if you haven't filed because you weren't required to file, there's an alternate mechanism where you can apply through the website for your stimulus payment. But again, the MC is not the expert on this, so please go to the IRS website for all details on how to apply for the stimulus payment. Okay, financial assistance. Several people have sent in questions about obtaining financial assistance from the embassy. We understand this is a very difficult time, and a lot of people are stuck in places they were not planning to be for an extended period. The embassy does have some possibility to issue loans, temporary subsistence loans for people that are in acute destitution. There is a process for this, an application process, and certain qualifications to be eligible for this. So please contact our office, askconsultabilisi@state.gov, if you are experiencing severe financial hardship, and let us work with you to see what is available. Joseph wrote in asking about, can we stay at embassy provided housing? Unfortunately, the embassy does not have additional housing for private United citizens. So that is not something that we can offer. Okay, I have a question wrote in. My girlfriend and I have been in Tbilisi since January 5th. I'm a US citizen, she is Hungarian. Can we go home? So at this time, as you may be aware, there are certain restrictions on foreign citizens entering the United States based on where you have been, what countries you have transited through. So if you're looking at commercial flights, you'll need to look very carefully at those current restrictions in place. There are exceptions for immediate family members of US citizens or green card holders. So spouses, children of a US citizen or green card holder have exceptions. But if you're not falling in one of those exceptions, then at this time you may not be able to enter the United States if you have transited through certain countries, which includes the Schengen zone. Please check our website or the State Department's website, where there's a lot of detailed information about what those countries are, who those restrictions apply to. I'm not going to be able to address every scenario here today, but the websites have a lot of information. And if you're still unsure, email the embassy and we'll try to help you sort it out. Okay, we've had several questions about embassy mail pouch. As you may know, diplomatic pouch, whether it could be made available to private U.S. citizens in a crisis time like this, specifically to import medications or prescription medications. So I need to let you know straight off that we are having the same situation with difficulty getting mail to the embassy. Right now, pouches are not arriving. So we're in the same situation as here at the embassy as you are, and as far as that goes. If and when pouches resume, at this time, it is not possible to use them for private U.S. citizens. That has more to do with international agreements that are in place, something called the Vienna Convention, which is an agreement negotiated between the countries on allowing things to enter the country without certain tariffs and duties and taxes. So whether or not we wanted to let you use the pouch to import medications, we would need to negotiate that with the government of Georgia. That has to be worked out as an agreement between governments. So that is something that I'm not saying that it won't ever happen. It is something that we could address, but it's not an option right now. However, we have checked it with several of the commercial shipping companies like DHL and FedEx, and they are still shipping packages. So that may be an option if you're trying to get prescription medications, for example, from a family member in the United States, to send them to you. So while, as with everything these days, you may have to prepare for delays in receiving shipments through DHL or FedEx, but those could be options that you could look at. Okay. Let's see. Any other travel-related questions? Maybe I'll turn it over to my colleague from the medical unit to answer a few of the medical questions that I've seen come in. Sarah? Okay. But then we can get back to travel questions again after that.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Cummings. I am the medical officer here at U.S. Embassy Tbilisi. Thank you all for tuning in today. We all know that this is a uncharted and interesting time, and we're here to help with as much information as we can provide and answer some of your questions. So the first question we received is, does the embassy have doctors or staff who are available to talk to American citizens by phone in case of questions? Unfortunately, the way that our embassy is set up, we do have a very small medical unit here. Based on licensing requirements and specific medical capabilities and capacities, we are only licensed within the country to be able to treat members of the chief of mission personnel or people who are affiliated with the embassy. We aren't able to provide any medical recommendations or expertise by phone or in person for any American who is not employed by or affiliated with the embassy. We know that that can be frustrating at times, and a lot of it has to do with our medical licensing and the prescriptive authority that's given to us by the country that we are working in. Another question we got from Bill, if we believe we might have COVID symptoms, what should we do? So the Georgian government has been working very hard on their COVID response. They've been recognized internationally for their forward-leaning efforts in managing their cases of the coronavirus, and have been working diligently with the World Health Organization and the CDC, and we have been very heartened by their efforts here. One of the things that they've put in place that we recommend is reaching out to 112 if you're concerned that you might have symptoms of COVID. The 112 system has actually set up a number of emergency triage phone operators. Most of them are doctors who can speak to you about your symptoms and determine whether or not you can wait at home, whether or not you should have testing at home, or refer you to a local facility where you can seek treatment. You will also have the capability of reaching out if you have your own private medical provider or general practitioner who can also give you recommendations and advice on how best to screen you for some of those symptoms. We know that it is also allergy season and cold season, so some of those symptoms can also overlap with possible COVID symptoms. The next question we have from John, which is, does the embassy have any doctors on staff? available to talk to citizens by phone in case of questions. So we just discussed that with our first question, and unfortunately, based on our medical capabilities and our licensing requirements, we aren't able to offer any medical recommendations or advice to anyone who's not directly affiliated with the medical unit within the embassy. Another question is, in case of a large-scale outbreak in Tbilisi, what medical services can the embassy offer? Specifically, does the embassy have extra ventilators if there is a shortage? So our embassy med unit here is actually 2 exam rooms. It is a very small-scale operation. We really depend a lot on our partners in the local economy to help us manage and troubleshoot different medical conditions. We definitely do not have additional medical services or extra ventilator capabilities. Any sort of urgent, emergent, significant medical care, we are also using the local economy as best we can to help support our staff here at the embassy. Marco says, I am a U.S. citizen, 70 years old, and currently living in Tbilisi, staying at home in isolation with my wife, and we are both healthy and feeling fine. However, my concern is that if I get affected by COVID-19 and I'm unable to obtain proper medical services in Tbilisi, could I contact the embassy for support? So in that situation, if you have any questions or concerns as an American citizen, we always encourage you to reach out to our American Citizen Services to see if there's something we can do to help you navigate that situation. Unfortunately, based on specific medical questions and requirements, again, we don't have the privileged medical authority to operate independently on the local economy here, so we wouldn't be able to provide direct medical support for that. Constantine asks, does the U.S. Embassy Tbilisi offer any medical logistical assistance to senior citizens at this time? Unfortunately, again, our range of care that we're able to provide medically is very, very limited. And it's not only specific to U.S. Embassy Tbilisi, but this is the set of requirements that we have finalized worldwide with all of our embassy medical units. We are a smaller facility. We are specifically assigned to navigate situations for the staff here at the embassy and their families. So while we do try to provide support, we are unable to do direct patient care or navigation for folks in the broader Tbilisi community. Another question that we've received, I'm an American internal medicine physician who's been working with an NGO here in Tbilisi since 2018. I've also worked as a medical officer for the U.S. Embassy in Dili in the past. I wanted to ask, which medical facility do you advise for U.S. citizens to go to for COVID-19 related concerns? So right now, it's a good question and one that I know folks are very interested in. We have been working closely, and this is also the recommendation that I would provide to any of our American embassy citizens, is that we've been working very closely with the Georgian government to manage all COVID-19 related cases and possible cases. So the national CDC here has done a tremendous job of working both with the World Health Organization, their Centers for Disease Control here, their infectious disease hospital, and have put in place a very robust program for managing and screening that. We do not have any specific screening capabilities here at the United States Embassy, and have been partnering closely with the NCDC for all of our COVID questions, concerns, and testing. So our main recommendation is to continue to call the 112 and work through 112, work through NCDC, work through the systems and protocols that the Georgian government has put in place. For those of you who have been here for a bit, if you've been in Tbilisi since 2018, you likely have a trusted healthcare professional in the local economy that you've been using. Many of them can offer recommendations and support, and you can reach out to them with any additional questions that you might have. The second follow-up question to that is, in the event that someone shows symptoms, is there testing available? Or symptoms, excuse me. There is testing available through the national CDC. They have been rolling out a program to test everyone who they think might possibly have it so that they can work to really limit the spread of it. They're working currently on getting more tests in the country because they don't want to run out, but they do have a nice centralized testing system, again through 112, where they will either direct you to a facility that can take the sample and then provide it to NCDC for testing, or work with you to get that test taken care of. And are there reliable medical facilities in Tbilisi for non-COVID-19 related health issues during this time? So, as many of you are aware, the baseline level of medical care that we see in Georgia is improving. It has always been below the standard that we would see in the United States, but there are facilities that do things with relatively acceptable medical standards here. If you all have been in country for a while, unfortunately, we can't offer specific medical recommendations, but surely you have experienced certain facilities in the community that you think are helpful. You have other medical professionals that you've utilized. You have friends and family who can offer you recommendations and support. Everyone is pulling predominantly from the same pool of information on COVID-19. And while it's a scary situation, we are learning a lot as we go, and people are doing their best to keep up with it and to make appropriate changes as we know more information. So I recommend that you have those conversations with your trusted health professionals in town. If you have any other non-COVID-19 related health issues, we do know that facilities are taking steps to separate themselves from some of the COVID-19 management so that they have safe spaces for people to go. And I would recommend having that conversation with the facilities that you have used before and frequent and trust to see what steps they're taking to keep their spaces safe. 3 more questions here. Let's see, plans for community-wide COVID-19 testing. It's a good question. It was one of the things that we saw successfully done in South Korea, and one of the reasons that we think South Korea has been able to contain the spread of COVID-19 so well. And what that was is that they set up large-scale community-wide testing, up to and including drive-throughs for driving your car and getting a test and getting the results very rapidly. Georgia has been very interested in moving to something like that because if they can identify early cases or mild cases, then they can contain those patients so that they're not affecting other people and infecting other people. What we have found is that there is a worldwide shortage of COVID-19 tests. So we do know that the Georgian government, the Ministry of Health, the NCDC are working very diligently to try and get more test kits on board, try to get rapid test kits on board to be able to roll out something like community-wide testing. So far, we are optimistic. They are optimistic, but they haven't quite gotten the capabilities yet to put a plan like that in place. But we do know that they are working diligently and are very interested in starting to put in place a similar mechanism like what we see in South Korea. Do local pharmacies fill prescriptions from the United States? It's a great question. Typically, if you have a prescription that has a signature on it and a medication and a dose, they are quite willing to fill it. Some of it is going to be dependent on the pharmacist, and some of it will be dependent on what the medication itself is. There are limitations on types of medicine that you can get here and quantities that you can get here. I don't think it would do you any harm to go to the local pharmacy and see what they say about your United States prescription. And some medications are available here that you require a prescription for in the States, so it might be that you don't even need that prescription to get your medication. And the last question, status of preparedness of medical facilities in regards to supplies and equipment. Another good question, and one that we're tracking very closely and that the Georgian government is tracking very closely. One of the recommended managements and important steps to take in preventing the spread of and caring for people that are infected with COVID-19 is your personal preparedness equipment. For medical professionals, that entails heavy-duty masks and gloves, often a face shield or some sort of goggles and gowns. The Georgia government has been working very hard to continue to stand up their capabilities. I know they're working with outside partners to bring in more personal protective equipment, and they're really working to make sure that they've got enough supplies on hand and to ensure that everyone is appropriately protected. I said that was the last one. I might have fibbed. There's 2 more. Where can I find masks here? It's a good question and a tough one, and one that everyone is struggling with. Throughout the world, we're seeing that there are shortages in certain types of personal protective equipment, difficulties in securing some of that equipment, and there is a big mask debate going on right now where certain camps think that not wearing masks is the best way unless you're sick or unless you are a medical professional who is very close to a sick patient, where other recommendations we're seeing is wearing masks when you leave the house. Some of that new recommendation is specifically because they think that there is a likelihood, we think there's a likelihood that people who are not symptomatic could also be shedding the virus, and that would help you protect yourself. Additionally, we're seeing that a number of facilities, such as grocery stores in town, are asking that people wear masks when they enter. As far as very significant medical masks, those ones are probably overkill and are also very difficult to find on the local economy currently. Those are the masks that we hope you would be able to preserve and reserve for people that are working day in and day out with COVID patients and our frontline medical professionals to help protect them in the fight against this virus. What we have found is that there is a robust mask making effort for cloth masks that are going on here in Georgia. Many of them are by people who have been NCDC certified. These are masks that you can wear when you go to the grocery store. We don't have good guidance or recommendation on how protective they are, but early indications are that at the very least they would protect other people if you happen to be accidentally shedding and unaware that you were sick. The key to those masks are to make sure that you are very careful when you take them off, that you wash them after each use, that you air them out. Sometimes we even recommend putting them in sunlight, which is antimicrobial. Those are general guidelines. They have not a lot of data supporting them, but are more common sense things. So I would ask around. I'm sure you can find vendors on Facebook and other places, but there are large scale efforts throughout Georgia and specifically Tbilisi to make some of these cloth masks that you could use to go about your day-to-day activities. Again, there are no formal medical recommendations. We don't have good data on it. So use your own personal judgment with what you feel most comfortable with for those. And then, is there medical marijuana in Georgia? It's a great question. I believe marijuana everywhere was legalized in Georgia. Do we know? I think
It was decriminalized.
Okay. It was decriminalized, but not legalized. And that was recently. That was within the last 6 months. So to that end, I'm not familiar with specific medical marijuana legislation, shops, necessities, but if it is decriminalized, though not legalized, I suppose, I don't know. I think that's,
One more.
oh, yes. All right. And then, do you know if the pneumonia vaccine given to persons over 65 is for Georgians only or also for long-term residents? It's a good question, and one that you would have to talk to one of the vaccine facilities about. I know quite typically the vaccine programs here are reserved for Georgian residents alone, up to and including adult vaccines and pediatric vaccines. I do also know that they have been making a number of exceptions for testing and treatment of folks within this new pandemic that we're seeing. So your best source for that would be to reach out to the places that are giving the pneumonia vaccine and see if they're making it more broadly available than their usual standards. I think that's a fair question to ask, and what we've seen is that Georgian government has been trying to be very inclusive in their testing and treatment for this. So those are my stack of questions. Thank you all for listening to me. I'm going to pass this over to our regional security officer. This is Mr. Brian Janik.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Janik. I'm from the Regional Security Office. I just wanted to comment on a few things and answer one of your questions. First of all, just a comment on the security situation here in Georgia. And as you've all experienced wherever you're living, you're seeing that there's calm throughout the country, and that is a good thing. We are not tracking any concerns at this time about social or civil unrest as the Georgian authorities continue to handle this situation well and deal with that situation. And so obviously we will put out guidance if we see anything changing for the worse, but right now we're glad to report that things are calm, as you're probably seeing on the streets. I encourage everyone, please continue to abide by the government's curfew, the rules and the regulations that they've put out now and what they may do in the future. We want to be model residents here in Georgia and continue to follow those rules. One of your questions was specifically regard to transportation and can families that exceed the limit of 3 passengers, meaning 1 driver, 2 in the back, how do we get around? I encourage you, and again, just reiterate that that is the rule and the standard here is 3 passengers, but obviously there are some practical considerations. You can't leave your 1-year-old at home if you have several small children. That's just not reasonable. So please, again, just try to limit your travel to necessity and respect the Georgians' request that we stay home. If you need to go out as a family of more than 3 because you have minors, please do so. But do so with the utmost respect for the rules. If you have obviously teenage children and you're a family of 4 or 5, please take 2 cabs. One of the questions was, can I go to the airport as a family? In that circumstance, please just try to abide by the rules as best you can. We want to respect those at all times. Ambassador Degnan brought up something before we started our session today, and that is the prevailing or increasing amount of social media scams and people out there trying to take advantage of vulnerable or scared people through solicitations of different false charities. There's a lot of false news and information out there. So please, it's practical guidance. If you weren't doing something before, don't start doing it now. If you weren't clicking on strange links before, don't start doing it now. Just recognize that there are unfortunately a lot of these web-based scams going on. I'm not going to talk in detail about those specific ones, but please take steps to protect your family on your social and online media use, and just realize, is this a real organization? Really take pause, like what am I doing and why, and is this necessary to protect myself? And then finally, just one last comment about emergency planning. Here, the Regional Security Office continues to focus a lot of our attention, as well as others here in the embassy, about the what ifs. That's part of our job here. And of course, we're doing it from an embassy perspective, but I encourage everyone out there, please, if you haven't done so already, think about your own emergency plans at home. Do you have enough food, supplies to last where you are? If for whatever reason it is, you have to stay there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you can't go out. Am I ready? Is my family ready? If you've already taken those steps, that's great. Please continue to do so. If you haven't, take that opportunity tonight. Sit down with your loved ones and think about, what do we need? If we don't have the opportunity to move around and shop and do the things that we have to do now, can I sort of sustain for an increased period of time? And I think if you do that, it'll help calm and relieve some of the stress that you may be experiencing. If you know, whatever happens, we're ready for it. Right? We can only do so much. And so, yeah, please, we encourage families to do that. So.
One more question here, Brian.
Sure. Just give me a second while I read the question. Okay. So the question is, and I'm reading a colleague's message, do you have any information about the possibility of changes to government restrictions in the near future, or extending the state of emergency beyond April 21st? I can say that we have no official indication of how long or what any of the curfew or the restrictions will be, or whether it will be extended beyond April 21st. At this time, like, there's obviously, people have rumors, and so we do track that, but at this time, we don't have any information for you. I guess it just goes along with my message to you on emergency planning. Just assume, I would say, that things are going to just continue as the government moves along to do whatever they're going to do, measures to contain this problem. And so continue your emergency planning. But do we have any specifics? No, we do not at this time. Thank you.
Hello, this is Jeanette again from the consular section. I'm just going to cover a couple more questions related to travel and assistance to U.S. citizens that have come in. So one person wrote in, how can my brother get an emergency passport? And there were some other people who wrote in about other normal document services that the embassy, that the consular section provides, passports, consular report of birth abroad, or getting a document notarized. For any non-urgent services at this time, we certainly recommend that you stay home and wait until the current crisis has subsided. But if you have any urgent matters, the American Citizen Services section does remain open, and we'll be happy to help you as our resources allow. You would want to schedule an appointment using the link on the embassy's website, or you can send an email as well, explaining the nature of the emergency and what you need the service for, and we will schedule an appointment for you. Someone wrote in, I'm a teacher and my contract expires in June. Will I still be able to return to the United States then? Gosh, we all wish we had a crystal ball and could predict exactly how long this crisis is going to last and when the world, in terms of travel and flights and border restrictions, will go back to normal. We don't have that information. We don't have a crystal ball right now. We're all certainly hoping and counting on the fact that within a month or two, we will see some improvement in the situation, but we can't give you any guarantees. We don't have any additional information beyond what we all know at this point. There was another question about mail. Currently have mail stuck in Germany. Is there any outlook when the country will accept mail? As far as we know, there are no specific restrictions on mail, except for the fact that, as you know, flights are very limited and flights are needed to move mail and packages around. So you would expect delays, but as far as we know, mail is still flowing with delays as flights are available. Let's see. I want to circle back once more to the financial assistance questions, as a couple of people have written in about that. I do not have money to go to the United States. How can the embassy assist me? The embassy can provide repatriation loans to help you purchase a ticket on a commercial flight to get back to the United States. If you do not have the money to buy a flight ticket right now, please get in touch with the embassy and we can provide you the steps in the application to get a repatriation loan. Likewise, there were some questions from James and Anna about options for Americans who are choosing to stay here in Georgia, but are in need of economic assistance. The embassy has some possibility. The U.S. government can provide some emergency financial assistance loans to U.S. citizens who are experiencing destitution, whether or not you're going back to the United States. Please get in touch with the embassy for that situation. There were a couple of questions about the visas, so I'll just touch on that briefly. American citizen who has a relative in the United States on a visa, will they be penalized for overstaying if they cannot leave the country before their authorized stay is over? So this is a matter that's handled by the Department of Homeland Security, specifically USCIS in the United States. They do have the discretion to grant an extension of an authorized stay to foreigners who are in the United States on a visa. We encourage you to apply for this benefit to extend your stay at this point if you're not able to leave. DHS has not made any blanket decision about amnesty or anything else for foreigners who are unable to leave the United States, but that information may be forthcoming, but we don't have it now. So in the meantime, the best course of action would be to go ahead and apply for an extension of status. Some of you have relatives who were trying to get a visa when all of this happened, and as you know, the embassy has had to suspend all visa services. We hope to get back to it as soon as possible. In the meantime, we are continuing to process a few visa cases, both non-immigrant and immigrant, on an emergency basis. Obviously, there's not a lot of flight options for travel right now, but for those people that do need to travel, for example, if you have a spouse who's trying to get an immigrant visa so that both of you can go to the United States together, please let us know. We are still doing a little bit of limited processing of emergency immigrant cases. Okay. With that, I would like to turn this back over to Ambassador Degnan for a couple more questions and a little bit more information. Thank you.
All right, I know we've provided you with a lot of information, and I just want to thank you again for the great questions that you've sent in and for your participating in this town hall today. And it's one way at least that we can stay in touch with you. One of the questions that came in was regarding the reported statistics that you're reading every day in the newspaper from Georgia. And we have no reason to think that these statistics aren't credible. In fact, I've been reading the same things that you probably have about some other countries that aren't very transparent with their processes or their numbers. And what reassures me is the fact that we have such a close collaboration between the National Center for Disease Control, the Lugar Lab here, and our Centers for Disease Control. They're working very closely together on the response to COVID-19 here. And my confidence level goes up that the numbers that we're reading are as accurate as they can be, given the fact that we're all learning about this virus as we go. So I have confidence that the numbers are pretty reliable. Another question that I wanted to address more generally is the economic rebound. Obviously, you're hearing from the Georgian government. They're thinking already about how to position Georgia to recover and rebound from this impact as quickly as possible. All of our countries are going to take a hit from this virus and what it's done, throwing us all into a pause for an extended period of time. We also are working with the Georgian government to help them think through the process of where best to put aid, where best to help businesses and families and individuals, how to channel that money in a way that's going to rebuild the economy as quickly as possible and keep sectors like tourism, travel, agriculture strong. The good news is the United States already has a number of assistance programs through USAID, through other agencies at the State Department, the Defense Department. So we already have programs that we were working with Georgia on in the agricultural area, small business area, also governance and media. So a wide range of projects. We're looking at how can we adjust those projects so that they have a COVID-19 aspect to them, whether it's current response or post-virus recovery. So I think you'll see that continued partnership between the United States and Georgia as we move through this pandemic, and we will continue to do our best to support Georgia and the Georgian government and Georgian businesses as they adapt and rebuild. And I think we may see some silver linings in terms of new ideas that come out of it. I've been so impressed with the mask makers who've come up with new ways of taking apparel making, manufacturing companies, and turning it into making gowns and face masks for our healthcare providers and for the general public. And we've seen that in a number of other areas, hand sanitizers and ventilators, and really quick response on the part of pretty creative and ingenious, in some cases, Georgians. So again, let me just thank you for participating today. I know these are some unusual and stressful times that we're going through. I just want to emphasize we will get through this. We will pass through this. The best way to get through it, of course, is for us all to follow the guidelines. On a number of the questions, it was a matter of, what will things be like in June or in fall, and can I plan for this or that? The best way to move through this quickly is for everybody just to obey the guidelines so that we can flatten that curve, get through the peak, and come out the other side. Give us the time we need to learn about this virus and to develop a vaccine and to get ourselves prepared so that we can manage this in a more regular fashion than we've had to through this emergency that hit us rather unexpectedly. I want to emphasize again that the protection and welfare of American citizens is the top priority of this embassy and of the United States government. We are doing what we can within the limitations that we have. Sometimes they're legal limitations, sometimes they're resource limitations, but I want you to believe and feel reassured that we are doing what we can. As you've heard from my colleagues here, we reach out to us on our website. There's a lot of good information. There's contact information there too. Please register for STEP. There's a lot of ways that we can stay in touch besides this opportunity, which doesn't come up as often. But we're here for you to the extent that we can help you. We want to do that. I urge you to reach out soon and to act soon if you're thinking about going back to the United States. It's a big decision, I understand that, but flight options are narrowing. And so I just encourage you, if that's what you're thinking about, make sure you've looked into what you're going home to if you're going to the United States, and be sure you're ready and organized on that end of the trip as well. But please, as you've heard from my colleagues, we do have information about the flights out there, and we will do what we can to help you get back to the United States. And I know that this is an important week in Georgia. Many people are preparing for Easter, whether it's here or elsewhere. I ask you to please find a safe way to observe this important holiday. We all want to return to our normal lives as soon as we can. It's just very important that we do what we can now to act responsibly, think of others, think of our families, appreciate your health, appreciate the health care providers who are out there trying to help us through this. And I know that very soon we'll all pass through this and be able to look back on this and know that we did the right thing. So thank you very much again for tuning in with us today.
Very nice semester.